Show, and we are going to start by talking about home flipping. And so you're lucky I did not say something stupid like it's Flippin' Friday. And no, I will not be naming the podcast Flippin' Friday. I was very tempted to, but we're going to start by talking about a new report from ATTOM Data Solutions that looks at home flipping for the first quarter of 2022. And so there's some good news, as always, with every housing report that we're going to be getting, at least in the near future. It's going to be a mix of good news and some bad news. And the good news is house flipping. Well, I guess you could say good news. House flipping is up. The bad news, you're making less money per flip, which, I mean, that kind of makes sense. And we'll get to it. All right. So let's start from the top, shall we? So how many flips? Is that I don't know. Is that the terminology? I'm not a house flipper, so I don't know. Is it flips? Are you flipping houses? Can you say it that way? But there were 114,706 homes that were flipped in the first quarter of 2022. That represented 9.6% of all home sales. And I'm not going to lie, because if you remember how big home flipping was in the mid-aughts before the housing crash? It's like all those shows on A&E and like everyone was home flipping. And it was like, but home flipping back then was like buying a house, sitting on it for 6 months and making 5%. And that's not really house flipping. You know, usually we think home flipping, it's like the A&E show, right? You flip this house, you buy the house, you gut it, you make it all cool and sell it for a decent profit, sometimes obscene profit. Just kidding. I was channeling Rush Limbaugh, obscene profit break. That's what he used to say. So that's what I think of house flipping. And the problem was in the mid-aughts, like it was just buying a home and then selling it. You didn't actually do anything. That's not really home flipping. But when you see that number start jumping, it means a lot of people are getting into an industry. And I remember reading, I think it was in, who's the guy that wrote The Big Short? And Money Poker. And what's the author's name? I got it on my bookshelf here. Hold on, I'm going to find it. Michael Lewis. See, look at that. I know that's horrible. That's bad for the podcast. That's bad for the video podcast. But I had to figure it out. Michael Lewis is the guy that wrote it. I remember him writing in The Big Short about how he knew, or one of the people he was interviewing said that they knew that the mortgage industry was, or the housing market was going to crash because all of these unsavory people were getting into the mortgage industry. And I'm not saying that people are getting into home flipping are unsavory. I'm not saying that. But when a lot of people start getting into something that don't have a lot of experience and start making a good amount of money, we talked about this recently with Airbnb and all these people getting involved, and it makes you kind of go, like you kind of cringe, like, I don't know if this is good. I don't know if this is a good thing or not. So you see all of a sudden 10% of home sales in Q1 were home flips. It does make me think, okay, maybe we're getting to the top now. We're getting to the top of this this ride up with regards to home prices. Now, this was up from the last quarter. That would be Q4 of 21 when it was 6.9%. Nice. 6.9. Nice. And it's so close to double what was reported in the first quarter of 2021, which is 4.9%. So it almost doubled in just a year. And in fact, this was the highest level since 2000. So you would have thought like mid 2000s, it would be the highest level, but no, 2000 is the last time we saw a number this high. And so we got home prices going up. We got borrowing costs going up and activity going up. It makes sense that home flipping profitability would decline. And it did. It actually fell to a 13-year low. And when I say that, I'm not talking about gross dollars. I'm talking about profit margin, because gross dollars in the first quarter, gross profit on a typical transaction was $67,000, which was actually higher than Q4 of 21. It was $63,500, but it was down from $70,000 when we saw that last year, first quarter of 2021. So gross profit still not doing that bad, but here is the kicker. Profit margins fell for the sixth quarter in a row. Right now, your return on investment, your ROI, is just 25.8%. That is down from the fourth quarter of 21 when it was 27.3%, and down substantially from just last year when it was 38.9%. And in fact, Profit margins now sit at the lowest point since the first quarter of 2009. And this is well off half, actually, more than half, from where we were at the all-time high at the end of 2016 when the average ROI was 53.1%. Pretty good. I would have thought like right after, because people would be buying up homes, but I guess you didn't really see that takeoff of home prices. So this is, like I said, well off the peak of 2016. And home flippers who sold properties, this is another sign, who sold properties in the first quarter of 2022 took an average of 162 days to complete the transaction. That was up from the 154 days that we saw in the fourth quarter of 21 and 157 days in the first quarter of 21. So it's up across the board. So it's taking longer to close and you're making less money. That's probably a sign that, and all these people are getting involved in it, more homes are being flipped, probably a sign that we're getting close to the top. And we know that. We've been talking about that here on the podcast. Rick Sharga, Executive Vice President of Market Intelligence for ATTOM, said this was a good and bad news for flippers. The good news for fix and flip investors is that demand remains strong from prospective home buyers. So there's people out there still buying homes, a lot of them. The bad news, rising mortgage interest rates are beginning to slow down home price appreciation, and buyers have become more selective and less willing to outbid other buyers for property. This is having a predictable impact on profit margins for investors. And because you're also reaching a point where home prices are so high, buying the initial property in order to flip, that's reaching a certain level. And then if you think home prices are going to fall, that's going to shrink your profit margin even more. And so more than likely, you're probably going to see a decline in home flipping, I would think. The problem is the people who haven't been in the business long enough aren't going to know that. And they're going to keep going full steam ahead. And that's going to be some bad news.